Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop. What we got today? Well, we're going to do some crank popping action. We're going to have a look at the Ariel leader cranks, or at least one of them, pop it apart on the press, take some dimensions, and we're going to have a look at the Lambretta crank as well and see if we can figure out how we can use the Lambretta connecting rods to solve some of the problems, at least on the Ariel cranks. So we've got that to come. We're also, hopefully, if we've got time, going to have a look at the chain line. There's some challenges to overcome in fitting the Ariel engine into the BSA frame, and the chain line obviously being, you know, the number one priority really. If we haven't got the chain line, we haven't got a fit, have we? So, but there are some challenges associated with that, so we'll have a look at that as well, and you'll see if I come up with a solution, which I hopefully will, to how we're going to do that. Right, let's get on and do some work. Right, over at the bench with some bits and pieces to play with and a cup of tea in my new BSA tea mug, which I got from National Motorcycle Museum, where legends live on. There you go. And got that last week when I was with Aid, and I will be keeping an eye on that mug because Mrs. Retro has a habit of breaking my nice tea mugs. Not on purpose, but she did break my Yamaha racing one, not on purpose, and she did break my classic bike one, which had lots of different classic bikes on it, not on purpose, and she did break my RZT tuning Simpson mug from Germany, not on purpose. And she did break my, hang on a minute, she might be trying to send me a message, so I'm going to keep an eye on that. Anyway, what have we got? Well, we have got one half of the leader crankshaft, the bolt half, if you like, the right hand side, and we've got the stripping ball stuff. So we're going to take it apart and we're going to strip it down, and the reason why we're doing this now is because Mr. Tweed is due to arrive within the next day or so, and we're going to have a look at crankshafts. So I'm going to strip this one down in preparation, and then when he comes we're going to strip the Lambretta one down that our good friend Mark at Team Pacemaker very kindly lent to us. And then we're going to do some comparisons, because we are fairly convinced that we can use the Lambretta rods to service our Ariel cranks, and we don't really have much of an option because these are 107 millimeters center to center, and the only other thing we can find, the only other machine we can find that uses that dimension is the Innocenti, the Lambretta. So yeah, that's kind of it for us really. I've perused quite a few connecting rod data sheets, you know, connecting rod manufacturers catalogues online, and I can't find anything else other than Lambretta that uses 107 millimeter rods. If you know of something, do let us know, you know, widen our option base, but I don't think there is anything other than Ariel and Lambretta. So that's the plan. So when he comes along, we're going to do, you know, measure up and strip down the Lambretta crank, and then we'll do a bit of head scratching. But we do have some limfacs. We have some limiting factors. I'm trying to keep this at a focal length that you can see. Hopefully you can see that the distance between the edge of the pin bore and this diameter here that the seals run on is very small. There's no money in that at all. So overboring the holes to take a bigger pin like you can do on a Bantam crankshaft, don't think we're going to really have the option to do that because there's just so little in it. We might get away with a couple of thou just to true things up and make the holes round again if they're particularly nasty, but we certainly won't be able to take them out to the Lambretta pin size, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it might be 19 mil, or it might even be bigger. I can't remember. However, that gives us a little bit of an advantage, because if it's a larger pin, and we can always make stepped pins, like a Bantam, where we've got the correct diameter here for the flywheel, and then we have a larger diameter for the bearing, and then obviously, you know, smaller diameter again on the end. So stepped pins is they are a possibility. So that's what we're going to look at. That is the plan, to get everything apart and just do some measuring and have a think about it. We could of course send these away to be remanufactured. There is somebody that does that, but there's a couple of disadvantages with that. I think that this rod is bent. They're certainly not in their first bloom of youth, these rods. They've had some real hammer. This one's all marked all the way around the bottom of the big end diameter here. I think it's, you know, picked up a roller, there's been a blow up and it's had something rattling around in there, and that's borne out by the fact that there's a nice little trench machined by a roller or something in the flywheel. And also I think I did a little bit of damage as well, because when I first started taking this apart with my new hex key down there, I think I was catching the rod because it was very notchy, and then what I eventually did was take it out, put it in the lathe and turn a bit off the diameter of the hex key, and it fitted a lot better. So some of this damage is probably down to me. But anyway, both rods are not great, and as I say, I think this one's also got a slight bend in it. And Mr. Tweed's rods are not even a matched pair. He's got one tapered type rod, and he's got one I-beam rod, so that would cost him even more money because he hasn't got matched rods. So I think doing something ourselves is the way forward, and I think the Lambretta rods are our best option. So that's to come. We're going to have a look at that. Also here I've got the gearbox sprocket and the output shaft and the bearing for the leader engine, and the reason why I've got these is because we have to fit these back in the casings, because in order to fit the casings into the frame we need to get the chain line. If we can't get the chain line, then it's a non-starter. We're knackered, aren't we, without that? There's no point thinking about where mountings are going to go until we've got the chain lined up. It's probably the primary consideration for fitting the engine into the frame. So that is the next, or certainly, one of the next challenges. And there are a couple of challenges associated with this. First of all, when this is fitted, if you're standing at the rear of the bike and you're looking towards the sprocket, you can't see it, because there's a big sort of chain case casting that comes off the back of the primary side, the sprocket is actually out of sight. I don't mean that in a groovy 1960s way. I mean it's actually out of sight. You can't see it, so that could be a challenge. And getting a straight edge down there to datum off the side of the sprocket could be difficult. We'll probably need to use a long rod that will go down there, and we can touch it off the side of the sprocket, or maybe we can use a laser. Maybe we can get all high tech and use a laser. I don't know. A laser. Anyway, I nearly did an impression of that movie, but I thought better of it. The other problem is, and you Bantamistas or Bantamites out there will see that is a much wider sprocket than fitted to the Bantam, because the leader takes a 428 size chain, which is 5/16, and the Bantam ordinarily takes a 3/16 chain. So we've got a bit of a discrepancy. I'm just going to confirm that actually. Yeah, 5/16 would be 3125. Is that right? 3125 or is it 3120? No, it's 3125, I think. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's bigger than a quarter, quite clearly, and that's coming in at 285. So yeah, I think that kind of confirmed that it's a 428 size chain. clearly bigger than a Bantam, and the sprocket fitted to the rear of the on the Bantam wheel at the moment is the 3/16. So we've got a discrepancy. We're going to have to compensate for that, but don't worry, I've got lots of experience in compensating, so yeah, we'll say no more about that. Anyway, we might have to build up the back of the sprocket with something, you know, tape a shim to it or something like that, just so that we can get the width, because I haven't got a sprocket, a 428 sprocket to go on there at the moment. Yeah, so that's another challenge. So we need to get these back in the casings anyway. That's probably the job to do first of all. This bearing that came out of the gearbox is like new. It's absolutely superb. I think it's going to go back in unless I completely buckle and just change it for the changing its sake. I don't see any reason why we can't reuse this. It looks quite an expensive bearing as well. Made in England by R&M, and it is an XXL J35. So there you go. But it's like new. That gearbox was remarkable. Do you remember when it came apart? The rest of the engine was looked like someone had thrown a grenade in there, but the gearbox, despite its lack of oil, was really good. So there you go. We need to do that as well. So we best get on and do something, hadn't we? Otherwise we'll sit here waffling all day long. Right, I've woke the press up because it's not been used for a while. Pressing back into service. Anyone? No? Okay. And I'm set up with a pusher, an aluminium pusher, which was the smallest one I had. I thought about turning up a new one, but I just thought we'd give this one a go. Anyway, I don't know how much force these cranks need, but we'll soon find out, won't we? Yeah. It's not even a whimper, it's just going. So I imagine this one's been apart a number of times before. And I don't like the weights kind of going at a funny angle. I need to find a better means of support, shall we say. But I have to say the crank went without so much as a whine or a pop, so I imagine we are by no means the first to take this crank apart. I'm trying to figure out how I can get better support, because this stripping bolster was made for a Bantam crank, obviously, which is much bigger. But it should do the job. Should do the job. Providing we're careful. Oh, here comes the rain again. Just try it like that. Okay, it has relinquished its grip. I'm not the only one around here. Right, let's get that out of there. What I'm trying to avoid is dropping all the bits on the floor and because I want to have a really good look at this crank. Interesting. Now, I've only ever seen them in the parts manual. There are the mysterious triangular thrust washers. Okay, so switch you off, over to the bench, strip all this lot off, and then we can push the rest of the pin out. Right, we're back at the bench. You haven't missed much, but all the rollers fell out, so the rod is off. We have triangular shaped thrust washer on one side. We have the rod, as I say, not looking brilliant, quite distorted. Looks as though it's got a sleeve in there. You can see these cameras aren't great up close, but you can see the interface between a sleeve and the actual rod itself. On this side you can see the mark where the thrust washer has been sitting. And then on this side we have what looks like another spacer or thrust, and then we have the triangular which appears to be a little bit stuck. Maybe it's trapped under the pin, not entirely sure. We'll know when we get the pin out, won't we? Let's not force anything. Yeah, there's the big bolt in the middle that ties everything together. Can't quite get that out yet, can't quite get that past the triangular thrust washer. So I'll press the other side of the pin out, and it is a stepped pin as well, as you can see. Pretty manky, but not the worst I've ever seen. So I'll go and press that out, and I'll come back and we'll have another look. Well, I decided to bring you along for the ride just in case we get a pop out of this side, because I wouldn't want you to miss it. You can see that I put a packing plate underneath because it's wasted at that end, so it'll be kind of tipped over, which was the issue we were having with the stripping bolster. But something to think about for next time. Let's see if we can get a pop out of this one. Oh yeah! That was more like it. Oh, there goes the thrust washer. Right, let's get you back over to the bench. Well, that was good, wasn't it? We got a bit of a pop, didn't we? I've got the parts book, but in a very un-Ariel-like fashion. It's not that detailed. Let me get you a better view. So, well, it is, but the connecting rod, bearing and pin, and the thrust that we found, the circular thrust that we found, not very good focus there, are one part number effectively. So that's fair enough. At least we know that thrust is supposed to be there, this one, which was sitting behind the connecting rod on this side, on the side where the bolt goes. So there is the bolt, and it's got a little shim on it, and there's supposed to be a circlip, but that came away when we were removing the cranks. I found it at the bottom of the crankcase, so we'll have to figure out where, get a new one and figure out where that goes, because that's supposed to stop that from coming out, I imagine. Well, I don't imagine. What other purpose can it possibly serve? We've got the key that came out with the bolt. This is the key that locates the two crankcase halves together, so we mustn't lose that. two triangular thrust washers, and then we have 17 rollers per side. They're not exactly beautiful. They're not terrible, but they're not exactly beautiful. But they're not going back, so it's not really a problem. Because the Lambretta rods come with a caged roller big end, like the later Bantam ones. So we've got the crank pin, stepped pin, as I mentioned before. Just going to give it a bit of a wipe before I show it to you. It's a bit crusty. And first thing we notice is that nasty chunk out of it there, look. Not good. Some corrosion. But yeah, it's sharp on that end as well for some reason. But not in its prime. There we go. Let's have a bit of a measure. Obviously it'll be in inches, but we'll do it in metric to start with. 17.5, 17.44, 17.45, and 22.75. .687, 688. That's probably supposed to be 11/16, and then what's this one? 898. 8965. A little bit of wear on it. Let's try and get it right in the middle where it's not maybe not as warm. And of course we're relying on the sensitivity of the caliper. 899, so that'll be in the 64th. I don't know what. I'll have to consult the charts, but that'll be something in the 64th, won't it? I'll tell you what, I'll find out for you. Right, 890 is 57/64, and 89. No, that's it. 890, 57/64, because 59/64, we're into the 920s. So let's have a look. 896, 897. Well, not sure. Maybe it's supposed to be 57/64. Anyway, a little bit immaterial really. All we need to know is what size are these holes. What size do we have to make our crank pin to get a good 3 thou probably fit, so that we can get a nice true crank. And do we need to do any work to them, given that we don't really have any room there to machine any out of them. We could go a little bit on there. I mean, if we encroached slightly into that surface there, I don't think it'd make too much of an issue. You can see where the seal runs. We'd probably be alright. And this surface needs some work anyway. This seal surface needs some work. we got corrosion. We're probably going to have to machine that back and fit a sleeve. So, work to be done. But doable, quite frankly. What's the thickness of our... We'll go to metric because we're going to be using a metric rod. Thickness of our connecting rod. Oh, it's all bent now, look. Oh, it's had a right... I'll tell you what, it's had a really hard life, this connecting rod. I don't think the lighting's good enough for you to see that. There's a big dent in it there. It's definitely picked up a roller at some point, I think. Let's try and get it in a fairly undamaged location. 12.65 plus 1.5, so what did I say, 12.65 plus 3 mil if we add the thrust washers in, so 15.65 is what we can get away with. Okay, well, no more. I'm not going to get into any more until Mr. Tweed gets here, because we're doing this together. So, together, like that advert used to say. We'll leave the crank at that, I think. We've got it apart. We've had a bit of a look at it. It's time to do so. Right, I've put the crank to one side. I've put all the losable bits in a magnetic tub, magnetic container, so they don't go walkies. And this is still a bit warm. I've just warmed up this casing and put the bearing back in there. As you can see, I just said it was a bit warm and then touched it. Hey, what a fool! Right, okay. So we're going to put the this in the output shaft. Just got a lump of aluminium just to give it a little bit of a love tap. It shouldn't need much. There we go. Oh, it's now attached to the bit of aluminium. That was a bit too good a fit, wasn't it? Oh, don't need it, it just goes in. So that's in there. Problem is now, stop it from falling out while I fit the sprocket. But that's my problem. I'll probably just sit it on a lump of metal and just tap it down gently. But let me show you what I meant earlier when I was talking about not being able to see the sprocket. So, tilt this up to the camera a little bit. So if the sprocket's in there like that, that's slipped out a bit, but the sprocket's in there like that. The only access that the chain has to the sprocket is through a window here and a window here. So from the back, that is what you see. So your view is completely, of the sprocket is completely obscured by this big casting here, and then you don't really get any space. I don't know if you can, if you look down there and see the light between the casting and the sprocket, that is the only gap you get to get something in there and basically take a I'm wiggling the sprocket so that you can see it, it's moving, just to contrast it against the light there. But yeah, that is the only kind of place that you get to. The sprocket's not fully on, so that gap will open up a little bit, but yeah, that is how you get your datum off the sprocket, so it's not going to be easy. So I'm thinking a rod, a long, let me grab a piece of rod. I don't think I've got anything long enough to go from the back wheel to there, so I'm going to have to find something. But here we go, bit of hydraulic pipe. Bit of hydraulic pipe, perfect. If I had a long enough piece of hydraulic pipe, a bit narrower than this, Look, because even that's too wide. But imagine we were going off the back of the sprocket, which I suppose we could. We could go off the face of the sprocket like that, and then onto the rear sprocket with something like that, because it's not gonna flex. It's not gonna flex like, for example, we have a meter steel rule here, a meter long steel rule. If we were to use this, this is going to be, we have to move you. I really want to show you this, illustrate this point. Let me just move you back. Yeah, if we were to use something like this, yes, it would fit in there, but the problem is, it does that, which might not be such a major problem as long as we clamp it to the rear sprocket and we just let it rest against the face of the front sprocket. That might work, but I'd rather have something that I knew wasn't going to flex like that, a rod or a tube. But we'll see. We'll cross the bridge when we come to it. Or maybe we'll use a magical beam of light, a laser pointer or something like that. But we'll figure it out, won't we? But that is that's what I need to do. I need to get the sprocket fully on there, do the nut up, you know, just sort of hand tight so it doesn't, well, it isn't going to come off, but just so we know that it's in the position it would be in the running position, and then we can start messing around, see if we can get it to fit. Now the rear sprocket, I was mentioning earlier about the rear sprocket being too narrow because it's not a what did I say? A 428 sprocket. It's a 3/16 sprocket, not a 5/16 sprocket. However, I've since discovered that there are 428 sprockets available for Bantam hubs, because the trials boys use them. However, the sizes of the sprockets that are available, I think the smallest you can get is a 54, which is probably a bit large for us. Probably need a 51 or a 52. We're going to have to sit down with a pencil and paper and do some mathematics and figure out what size sprocket we need to replicate the gearing on an aerial leader, because the aerial leader had 16-inch wheels and we're using 18-inch wheels. So we're going to need to figure that out. What size was the sprocket on an aerial leader, and on the rear wheel, what size is this sprocket, and we'll figure it out for an 18-inch wheel. But I suspect 54 is not the number we'll end up with, but that is what is, I think that is the smallest trial sprocket that is available in a 428 chain size. So yeah, there you go. More discoveries await us. There we go. I did exactly what I said I was going to do. Balanced it on a couple of big bits of aluminium and just tapped it down, and just did the nut up hand tight so it won't fall off. Not that it would, I don't think, but yeah, you can see where it sits. Get it in the light. It's difficult to show you really. Can I make it any better by doing that? Probably not. Can I make it any better by doing that? Not really. But I think it demonstrates how much access we have to the sprocket, and it's not a lot. We'll let a bit of hydraulic pipe go in there now that we've got the sprocket all the way on. No, not really. So it might have to be the straight edge, it will adjust, but it's, yeah, it's not lying flat, so yeah, hardly ideal. So that's what we need to do. Figure something out, I'm sure. Right, I fitted the sprocket. Let me just squeeze back onto my stool here. Yeah, fitted the sprocket. I remembered to fit the spacer, which I didn't at first, and I just stood it on a piece of, I just stood the gearbox upside down on a piece of bar stock to hold the shaft in place while I gently tapped the sprocket on, and then the nut is just hand tight. So that's in position where it would be, and we can use it as our datum. And I've been thinking about how to do it because of this limited access that we've got here. And I remembered, excuse me sniffing, I'm coming down with a bit of a cold I think. Anyway, I remembered watching somebody, and I think it was Michael, apologies if it wasn't, but I think it was, one of the channels that I watch for inspiration anyway, but I think it was Michael, used a piece of U-channel, not YouTube channel because that's what you're watching right now, piece of U-channel to go, basically this wasn't it here on his bike, but to sit on top of the sprocket, literally top hat on top of the sprocket, run back to the rear sprocket and sit on top of the rear sprocket, and if it's in line and it goes on snugly, then you're in line. If it, you know, if it feels like you're having to force it, or it won't go on, it wants to go either side, then you know you're not in line. So I've ordered a piece of U-channel, 1 meter length, which will go down here perfectly well, clear everything, sit on top of the sprocket, and we can use that. And I think that's the answer. So whoever it was, if it was you Michael, thank you very much. If it wasn't you, I apologise. If it was somebody else that's watching, and you're going, hey, that was me, let me know, and I will credit you in the next video. But whoever it was, thank you. And yeah, I think we've cracked it. It just took a bit of thinking about, a bit of memory, and I think we've come up with a solution. And so I'll, you know, once this thing comes in, I'll use it, and then Tweedy can use it as well. We can, you know, we can both use it. So there you go. I think we've come to the solution. Right, notebook. I'm not going to go through it in great detail because it would take probably 15 minutes, and you'd all be asleep. I've been doing some very rough and ready mathematics to try and figure out the gearing, or at least a starting point. Now, obviously, we've got a lot of data missing. We don't really know a lot of things. We don't know an awful lot about the power characteristics of this engine. In fact, we know nothing. I've never ridden an Ariel Arrow or an Ariel Leader, so I don't know what they're like. So we're just trying to get a baseline, really. So what I've been doing with these calculations is I've tried to figure out from the original gearing that would have been on the bike as an aerial with a 16-inch wheel, which is what they had, taking old style tyres to be 100% aspect ratio, which, having measured the ones on this bike here, the rear one, it is. I've got 24 inches, which is an 18-inch wheel with a 3-inch tyre. So 3 inch either side gives us 24 inches diameter. So I've done the same for the 16-inch. They were fitted with a 3.25. So we've used the same aspect ratio. We're guessing to some degree. Gives us 18.5 inches, and one revolution of the wheel would give us 58.12 inches of travel. But obviously one revolution of the gearbox output isn't equivalent to one revolution of the wheel. You've got to divide by the gear ratio. So the original gear ratios on the Leader was 1847 or 1849, the sprockets, not the gear ratios. I think mine would have been an 1847 because it's a 1960 bike, and that's what I've been able to find out, which is 2.61 to 1. Gives us, for one revolution of the gearbox, gives us 22.27 inches travel of the motorcycle. So I've been messing around with numbers to try and get somewhere near. Obviously you're not going to get exactly the same, and it's all kind of academic because it doesn't take into account the mass of the motorcycle that the engine's got to move. It doesn't take into account the resistance of the friction, of the wind going past you, of the mass of the rider, or any of those things that will alter the gearing. The most important thing is the power characteristics of the engine and what it can do. It doesn't take any of that into account. But I've been crunching some numbers, I've come up with some figures, and I think, you know, I poo-pooed the 54 tooth sprocket. I think it's a good starting point actually, because it gives us, with an 1854, gives us 3 to 1, 25.13 inches of travel for one revolution of the gearbox, which is 3 inches, not quite 3 inches more than the standard. So, you know, near or near enough, we don't know. I did do a little bit of research online and found a guy that had changed the wheels on his actual Ariel Arrow for 18-inch wheels because he couldn't get the tires. 16-inch tires are getting a bit hard to come by, and he was running the 52. I don't know what front sprocket he was running, so that would give us either 2.89 to 1 or 2.74 to 1. So that's harder work for the engine than the gearing that I'm suggesting. So what we might end up with is an engine that revs out and we feel like we need another gear. Well, that's preferable to an engine that won't pull top for a starting point. Then we can always work our way down. If we want anything smaller than a 54 though, we're going to have to buy a sprocket blank and do some machining, because the 54 is the smallest I could find ready-made off the shelf. So that's where we're going to start. That, you know, I think it's a starting point. At least, you know, it should pull it, and it will get us out the starting blocks, and then we can, you know, start taking into account real world sort of conditions and start playing with the gearing. But anyway, that was just a little exercise on the notebook, a little bit academic, not particularly, you know, doesn't take into account a lot of the factors that we don't have, but it's a start. Right guys, we are going to leave it there for now. We're not going to get onto Lambretta crank this time around. This is the crank that Mark from Team Pacemaker very kindly lent to us. We were going to strip it down, but unfortunately I've not been the full shilling this week. I've been a bit under the weather, and poor old Mr. Tweed has the flu. So yeah, it's just one of those things really. We're not going to get around to it this turn of the handle, but we will get onto it soon, and of course we will share it with you. We will carefully strip it down, do some measurements, and we'll figure out how we can use Lambretta rods to solve our problems, or some of our problems at least, with the Ariel cranks. I'm pretty sure it's going to work, so do watch out for that. That will be, you know, in the not too distant future. Tweedy has put out a video yesterday. Today is Saturday, so he put out a video yesterday stripping down his Ariel cranks and some other bits and pieces as well. Well worth a watch. Do go along and watch that, because you'll see similarities similarities and variations in the damage that he found on his cranks compared to mine. So worth a watch. Go and have a look at that. What else? The channel came in. This is for sighting the chain alignment on the Ariel Bantam. So this is going to work really well. It fits over the front sprocket perfectly. Once the rear sprocket comes in, I've ordered it. We'll be able to use that to get the line of sight for the chain. And I'm pretty sure it was Michael that used channel to do this job on his channel. So if we're following in Michael's footsteps, then we're definitely on the right track. And yeah, that is going to work really well for us. The D7 is on the bench, up on the ramp. I've got a couple of jobs to do on that, so I will I'll film that as well, take you along. I've got a bit of a servicing to do on it, and some niggly jobs that I just want to sort out that I'm not quite happy with. So we'll have a look at that. I'm not going to ride it through the winter. I'm not too old for that game now. I'm not that much of a masochist, but I do intend to use it over the winter. You know, if we get some nice days, go out for a bit of a bimble around the villages and just blow the cobwebs off. And hopefully, once we've done the work to it, we'll take it out for a test ride, and I'll take the camera along. So we've got that to look forward to. So that's it really. Thanks very much indeed to everyone who has subscribed recently, and those of you who've been with me for a while. Hugely appreciated. If you haven't subscribed yet, do please hit the button. It will help me out hugely, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. I do like the comments, I do like replying to them, and I do try to get round all of the comments eventually. So yeah, do please keep doing that. Last but not least, big shout out to Pedro over in Portugal. He's actually been staying in the UK for a bit, but he's going home. So safe journey, Pedro. He is doing a B175 Bushman, and I hope that you get your rear sprocket bolts sorted out. Hopefully I've given you a steer in the right direction to get hold of some of those. So good luck with your rebuild, Pedro, and hopefully we might get to see it when it's done. Right, on that note, I will say mind how you go, and I will see you on the next video. Bye for now.